So in terms of any slideshow presentation, again, remember to have a cover slide, a presentation preview, and one slide for each main point and a review one. So the presentation, the cover slide could just be introducing your topic and maybe having your name, right? The preview, in my slides, that's like when I say key concepts. So your preview slide could just be your 3 main points and just 3 bullets right there. So today, and as you say the thesis statement, today I'm going to talk about A, B, and C. You've got A, B, and C just listed there. And your review slide can be the same thing. Use a maximum of 4 to 5 points per slide and 2 slides per minute. So don't have big paragraphs of text, right? And don't have 10 bullets of examples either, because you're just trying to avoid information overload. Now, there's an exception to this for if you're giving a highly technical presentation and the audience isn't that familiar with the topic. But that being said, you still want to try to limit the content as much as possible to make it easily to understand, because again, they're supposed to supplement the presentation, not drive it. And don't go too fast, right? Use consistent fonts, color schemes, and animations. There's research that shows people, if there's too many colors and fonts going on, it's just kind of a distraction, and they don't like that. Just as a good piece of advice is to always save things. I realize most of you save stuff online, but also save it to a flash drive. Have a backup printed out. That way, if you can't log into your account, access the internet, you can still give the presentation. Or if something goes wrong with technology in the room entirely, right, you would have a printout. So let's talk a little bit about charts and graphs, so sort of when you put these on the visual aids. Now, these are really helpful to summarize complex information and help people kind of see things, again, visually versus just giving them, even just throwing the information in front of them. But when you're going to use these, you got to do them the right way. So first of all, make sure you title and label everything, right? Again, make sure that they're easy to understand. If they're too complex, right, that's taking too much distraction away from you and whatever points you're making. Quickly summarize these. And remember, you can always add the more complex ones added to your project proposal or business plan for them to review later, right? So you could take a complex chart or graph and throw it up there really quickly to summarize, or throw a simplified version of it and say the more complex one is in the project proposal. But to give you an idea of how effective these can be to help people interpret and understand information, give you an example of a good and a bad graph. So you've got some information here. And by the way, there are 2 trends that are supposed to be apparent from these numbers. So if I throw this up to you, okay, and I just had a stopwatch and I was timing it, what's going on here, right? What are the trends? It's kind of hard to see what's going on. You're going to have to read the number, then try to make the comparisons and figure it out. It's going to take a while. So you've got this information up here. This next slide is the exact same information. That's the same information. Now, if I was timing you on this one, you would much more readily figure out what was going on. That there's 2 things going on. One, March, something happened, right? Blue shot up dramatically. And in the other months, the relationship's about the same. In fact, by the way, in the other months, red's about 10 more than blue every time. And that information's apparent here, but it's going to take longer to comprehend. Now, the only difference between these 2 graphs and charts is that this is actually putting the number in a real graph. And I did title and label it, but you don't need to know that red and blue is leading competitor versus our company to see how this just shows you how impactful a graph or a chart can be. Right? Because that first one, it actually isn't really a graph. It's just showing you the numbers. So using them is really helpful. So I'm going to now kind of give you some examples of some good or bad uses of visual aids. So let's look at a couple of good and bad examples really mixed within the same presentation. So this was a presentation done on medical marijuana. So you've got a cover slide here. And then their first slide is that Congress should legalize the use of medical marijuana. So this is their thesis statement for a persuasive speech. that they've just sort of put up there. Now, you can do this. This is fine. This is a preview slide. I think you should actually, you'd be better off. It doesn't quite say what the main points are, just having 3 bullets of the main points. So this is kind of good effort, but it could have been a little bit better by just listing those main points. Then we go to this diagram here. So what's happening? Okay, they've got this this chart showing you some states, they're white states, dark green, and aqua. What's the problem? Well, it's not labeled, right? So I don't know what these different states mean. Are the dark green states states that have legalized marijuana for medicinal and recreational use, and the aqua states, maybe they haven't? It's only legal for recreational use, but it could mean other things, right? Does it mean those states have tried to pass it, but the legislation failed? So you've got to make sure you title things, because if not, again, it's not easy to understand, and it can be distracting in the presentation. And so again, good effort, but not quite really what you want to do. You go on to the next slide, and they've got the exact same problem, right? So we've got this pie chart, prefer a certain percentage that prefer marijuana versus prefer prescription drugs. Now, I think what they're trying to say is patients, when they go into their medical provider, if they were given a choice between medical marijuana or a pharmaceutical, what would they prefer? That they would prefer marijuana. But the problem is this still, you're kind of limiting the persuasive impact by not labeling this. So, for example, what condition are they treating? So if, for example, this was showing that marijuana acts as a therapeutic for cancer treatment, and it turns out that a lot of cancer patients would prefer it as an effective measure, that would be more impactful than if we're talking about just generic aches and pains. Maybe, right? I guess it depends. Or who prefers it? What if this was the medical providers, right? What if I had research that said physicians would actually rather prescribe medicinal grade marijuana than a traditional pharmaceutical? That'd be really powerful. And maybe that's the research they have, but they're limiting the impact by not labeling it correctly. So you go to this next slide. Now, what are they trying to do here? They are trying to be supplementals. That's adding extra examples. So they're not going to talk about all these things. What they were trying to list was things that medical marijuana has been used to treat, that is also treated by pharmaceuticals. So, okay, you can add some extra examples, but what should they have done? They should have kept it to maybe 4 or 5 bullet points, okay? Instead of a list here of, you've got 8 bullet points. And here's the other thing, there's information we don't need. You've got all these technical names for these drugs. We don't need all those technical names, right? They're just extra examples. We don't need to throw that in. Next slide, it's a quote, right? That's fine to put quotes. They can be hard to remember. They can conceptualize things really well. It's okay to put quotes on a visual aid. And then they go to this slide on benefits of medical marijuana. So it reduces pain, prevents nausea, vomiting. So this is a little bit better. They've titled it, and they've lowered the bullets. Now, I would say there's still maybe 1 bullet too many, but it is a lot better, right? They've condensed information. They've also taken the names out of the comparable pharmaceutical and that sort of stuff. So this is a little bit better slide. Now, that's their last slide. So what are they missing? A review slide, right? And so if you look at this, this is an example of kind of a good and bad Jekyll and Hyde presentation. All right, this slide is an example of a speech with pretty solid content, but they do a really poor job with how they present the information. It's very distracting. So they get really carried away with the animations and how they present the images. So let's talk about it. So it's a speech on global warming. So that's their cover slide. They have a preview slide with their thesis statement. Again, that's fine. I still think you should put the 3 main points up there in bullets, but that's okay. And then we get into the first main point. What is global warming? And so they've got this diagram here, the greenhouse effect, which is global warming. So what's the problem with this? The image is too small. You've got all this wasted dead space, right, around the image. What this person could have done was really just said, let me explain, global warming is the greenhouse effect. So you don't need that title, what is global warming? And you could have made the entire slide this diagram, right? Now, in terms of like not being able to make the images large enough, the reason people make this mistake is you're working on your computer at home, and you have to think about how is this image going to look when it's projected in a room and people are sitting 20, 30 feet back, right? Can they see? So just make sure you don't have a bunch of dead space. Fill that. If it's not being filled with text, then enlarge the image. You go to the next slide, and why does global warming happen? Natural causes were the explanation, but not anymore. Okay, couple things going on here. So these images, you don't want images to overlap like that. Okay, they don't need to overlap. So again, you've got some dead space in this frame here. You could blow those up to where they're not overlapping. Do not randomly caps lock something. So this is where, again, you're not being consistent with your fonts and your color schemes. Notice it says natural causes, then she capitalizes were. You've got to, this isn't an angry text you're sending to somebody, right? So be consistent. It's okay to use caps lock, but use it throughout your text, or don't use it. Titles, it's okay. So titles are always caps lock. So like if you're using PowerPoint, it's going to naturally caps lock the title. That's fine, but the text slide underneath, the text underneath it, make sure you're consistent. We get to the next slide. And what you're going to see here is that they get really crazy with the animations. So Greenland and Arctic ice sheets have been melting. Ice melting causes sea levels to rise, resulting in flooding. Wildlife species are at risk of extinction. So what's the problem there? If I were to ask you right now, what were the three things she just discussed? You're not going to remember it, even though I just went over it. Now, it's okay to delay when people see things to sort of control what they're focusing on, right? That's fine, but once you put it up there, leave it up there. So don't have animations where content disappears. And as I go through the rest of this, you're going to see that what this student does is, it's almost like they decide that they're going to show you that they know how to use every possible animation. So now, all of a sudden at random, let's just have the bullets turn purple. Right? Now this one's just rising up there. A little purple. More rising. Whoa. See? And what's going to happen is eventually the audience will start saying, gee, I wonder which animation's next. Because you're just changing them constantly. So it's look at that one, too much of a distraction. A little chalkboard. So don't do that. Keep in mind, again, it's a supplement to the presentation. It's not, it shouldn't be driving it to where your speech is a distraction. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the do's and don'ts when it comes to visual aids.